It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Aggronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belghast, and let's start the show.
Hey folks, it's that time again. Time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 389. Tonight I'm joined by Ammo.
Hello.
Ashgar.
Hi.
Tam.
Hello.
And Thalen.
Hi there.
We're down some people because, life happens. But we also have a long list of everything that we didn't get to last week. So hopefully it'll be a show. What is Trek to Yomi? I have seen this name appearing in my feed.
Trek to Yomi is, as a bunch of people really, really liked Seven Samurai and wanted to make it into a video game.
Okay. Isn't
Samurai's
that
really good?
Isn't that Ghost of Tsushima?
Well, so it's really interesting because yes, Ghost of Tsushima definitely is doing that. This is like, sometimes you go back and you watch an old classic movie and you have that feeling of the old classic movie is kind of like you can tell that it's like old cinematography and old structures and shots and so on.
Mm-hmm.
What if somebody did that intentionally in a video game?
Okay, I'm on board.
So like the entire game is black and white. It's got a pretty heavy film grain effect, as well as that lighting that is what I always associate with old black and white movies.
So like that really soft lighting.
Yeah, that really soft lighting that darkens weirdly around the edges.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're playing, it is a 3D game, but almost all of the gameplay, basically the combat sections, are 2D Bushido Blade style.
Okay.
You have really simple attacks and you've got combos and you don't have a ton of hit points and your enemies sure don't have a ton of hit points. And you're like Bushido blading your way through very Seven Samurai like fights where it's like, oh, you step past somebody and slash them in the back and that's the fight. It's weirdly compelling.
So basically like showdown mode from Tsushima, but
yeah,
there's no other fight. It's just that. Like either you win or you lose.
Kinda, yeah. But it's a little bit more fighting game-esque because it's you're in a 2D. Bushido Blade is like the closest thing I can envision because it's
Nidhogg, I think, also did that thing a few years ago.
Yeah, I didn't play that one.
Comparison too. I guess the first one of those is actually pretty good.
I should give it a shot.
I mean, that's a sort of different style of fighting game.
As is this. Like, I call it a fighting game. I hate to compare it to that Mortal Kombat side scroller, the platforming side scroller where it uses Mortal Kombat.
I liked that game.
Well, this is
Sub-Zero Mythologies.
Game, this is like a modern imagining of it.
Nidhogg always kind of reminded me of you took the fighting from Prince of Persia and made an entire game out of it.
Yeah. And there's interesting AI logic. You've got really simple things, but the way you approach enemies and stuff is just varies based on what you're dealing with. Even something as simple as person has a spear. Also, yes, Nidhogg. Now that I have seen Nidhogg, this, not visually, but definitely a similar vibe.
Mm-hmm.
It's slower paced.
That's probably for the best.
And I got distracted from it, so I haven't finished it. But I got distracted from it by Citizen Sleeper. Whoops. But it's it also is written like a modern, a more modern Seven Samurai style movie, which I find interesting, but a modern imagining of one. What if we didn't have 40s era misogyny and stuff like that, but also the writing style is very similar. It has its special effects look like old black and white movie special effects, which I can't. I find that just it's weirdly delightful. Like buildings on fire have that. I don't even really know how to describe it, but
As in the fire is shadows being cast on a silk screen or something.
yeah, or like there's fire there, but things only sort of look like they're actually on fire. I don't know. It's hard to describe, but it hits that black and white. It hits the black and white movie feel better even than Ghost of Tsushima, I think. It has a little bit much of the doom and gloom. Like my partner came by while I was playing it. It was like, why is everybody always just like wailing in sadness in this game? Because like you're going through the town that's been under attack and you're just like wandering past people who are wailing in sadness.
It's been a
But I've
rough
also
week.
gotten past like the act 1, and then now supernatural stuff is happening, which is about where I got. But like, I don't know. I hope I don't have to fight any Oni.
Entirely possible. It sounds interesting.
It was neat. It's worth like, I watched a few videos and I was like, all right, this video seems like this looks like something I would be interested in at least trying. And it's been interesting. You know, I can't say it's like, oh, this is the most amazing game I've played, but I definitely enjoy it, and it's got a unique aesthetic going on.
So one of the things that I have been doing since we all played New World is I have been more or less tracking its downfall. Because things are not going well numerically for New World.
No.
It's got like a, I don't know, 15,000 to 25,000 player base now from just shy of 1 million. So that's a thing. But I am not entirely certain what prompted me to do it, but I reinstalled it and decided to give the game a spin and see what all had changed.
Oh, Bell.
Like, there's a shocking number of really good changes that have been made to this game.
To be fair, we have done this before with games like FF14 and Guild Wars 2.
Right.
It's
Like,
true.
we bounced out of FF14, and I don't know why, but then about a year later, we returned, and it was like the most magical experience ever. So, like,
I mean,
sometimes games get better.
Because the initial story is not as amazing as what came later, and the economy balance at launch was not good.
It was real
Economy was
bad.
Those are
and
the primary
leveling-
reasons we bounced out initially.
Yeah, and the leveling curve was bad. Like that's part of what bounced me out of it.
So, like, when I put New World to bed, there were a whole bunch of problems with the game. Like, they had broken any of the open world camps. They were pushing people to run dungeons, but like the dungeon running experience was painful because you had to craft stupid keys.
Like wasn't dungeon running, if you didn't like do it perfectly and quickly, a losing proposition, like financially?
Well, yeah, repairs were painful. Like,
Yeah.
but also like the big problem was the keys were really painful to craft, and like
Yeah, they took a lot.
you had to like grind rifts to get, corrupted bits to combine with like all of these tier 5 materials to pour into building a key. But like to get some of the materials, you had to farm open world zones, which were no longer viable. So like it was a bad situation. So one of the problems with New World is they're not good at announcing when things have changed. I wrote a post this week about like all of the things that I've noticed that have changed. And before doing so, I poured through all of the patch notes that have been released since November. Not a damn word about any of the things that I experienced was in any of the patch notes. So like, I don't know how players are supposed to know these things have changed. So first of all, teleporting around the world was a pain in the butt. And when you teleported, it cost this resource called Azoth. And the price of the teleport was a calculation based on how far you were traveling and how much stuff you had in your inventory. And it was not unrealistic that, like, if you had a semi-loaded inventory, a single teleport could burn through all 1,000 Azoth at a single go. So like teleporting was just not viable, which is why placing your houses around the world strategically was super important.
Yeah, it was clearly intended that if you wanted to transport a whole bunch of stuff from one town to another, that you were going to like carry it over land.
So now every teleport is 20 Azoth or less, does not factor in distance, does not factor in how much you're carrying. You could just teleport around for 20 Azoth.
Well,
you can make back 20 Azoth in like a couple of kills.
Yeah,
like
that's not,
it is trivial.
or a couple of harvests.
So
I'm guessing
teleportation.
the Azoth harvesting tools are not.
No,
a
they've
big
not been
deal that
nerfed.
They used to be. No,
No,
it's just that you don't need them now.
Yeah, you don't need them. But like if I kill a, I don't know, 50 to 60 enemy, a lot of times I'm getting 15 Azoth on a kill. So like I get back my teleport instantly. So like that happened. And resetting your teleport for your house is no longer the big deal that it once was, because like that was a cheap way to teleport. So like that happened. Also, storage chests were a pain in the butt because you had essentially to gather up all your resources and kind of hoard it in a single location because one, it was too expensive to teleport anything around, and two, like you didn't have much storage and it was increased by your housing, and you could put chests in your house to give you a little bit more storage. So what ended up happening is like players, like there's a bunch of unintended consequences surrounding this. And the reality is every player was set up in either Windsward, Everfall, or Brightwood. Like there were only 3 towns that ever had any players in them because they were the most strategically located, and because moving stuff around the world was a pain, everybody just kind of stayed there.
Well, and you were going to craft wherever you had your stuff, and because transporting it somewhere else sucked. So you wanted to have your stuff somewhere that had good crafting machines. So yeah, everybody just kind of coalesced.
There was also another side effect of this to where, like, if your faction controlled territory, you could retrieve items from banks in other cities. But this was ungodly cost prohibitive, so nobody ever did it. So now you can store stuff in any town you want and remove stuff freely from the bank, no cost, no faction, anything. Just every town is viable now. So, like it gives you a reason to actually go into other territories and level them up so you get more storage. And you basically just have, I don't know, 13, 14 banks, however many outposts there are in the world, and you can move them, remove items from them freely. And what this has done is it's spread the player base out to where, those far-flung communities like Morningdale or Reekwater or, wherever are perfectly reasonable places to go hang out because you can dump stuff in your bank in any town. Like the aptitude system had just gone in when I last played, where if you are harvesting over maximum level, every third of a level you get a chest of goodies, and it feels like they've greatly increased the rewards on those. So all of those unobtainiums that were like super hard to get that you needed from like mining, orichalcum or, mining or harvesting wire fiber, that caused people to like have those constantly farmed down because they basically were throwing away the actual resource and hunting for whatever orange or purple item that they were trying to chase.
Mm-hmm.
Those come out of these aptitude chests. Like I opened one the other day and got 10 Scarhide and I think 8 of whatever the other orange leather was. I've gotten Void Ore from them. I've gotten all sorts of random previously super expensive things. Void Ore was, when I last played, 10k a pop. And I put up a buy order for 150 gold and filled 7 of them like within a day. So a lot of the high-end materials that used to be super rare and super expensive are now really reasonable, and I crafted myself a set of Void Bent and finished leveling my armor into 200. And it was painful and mostly bankrupted me, but like level 600 gear, so who cares? So yeah, like they've made a bunch of really interesting changes to the way that the game works. They've made the faction vendors actually useful, so all of the dungeon keys, no matter what level of the game you're playing, can just be bought off of your faction vendor. So like if you want to run
so much better.
whatever that first one was, Star Shrine, or I don't remember what the first one was called. Amryn was the first one. So like, yeah, I think it's like 50 coins plus a few faction tokens, and you can buy more of those keys. So like as a result, I think the highest tier ones are 500 gold for a key, which is fine. You're probably going to make that back in cash from completing the place in the first place. So yeah, like they've done a bunch of things. Like I still think the key system is kind of dumb, but this is a less worse version of the key system. I mean, the problem is, from what I understand, they've also even walked back the outdoor zones to where they're perfectly viable again, but nobody's doing it because keys are so prevalent and dungeons now drop so much loot that it's the optimization of the player base.
Yeah. I mean, it does kind of sound like they've basically given up on their intentions of an economy, and like it sounds like at least short term that's good.
Well,
I do wonder what the long term repercussions will be.
Well, and they
I don't
even
know.
walked back some of their so they put in the expertise system, which was like a better version of their item snapshot system that was actually giving you some guidance as to what level everything was at currently.
Right, but this was already a worse version of Destiny's light level system.
Right, exactly. It's already a dumb system, but like there are 3 easy ways each day to get a gypsum, which you can turn into an orb that gives you a number of guaranteed levels of expertise each day. But it seems like they walked back. Like originally when they put that system in, it was supposed to be that, you know, if you picked up an item, you would only be able to use it at your expertise level. So like if it was a level 600 item and you only had 505 expertise in that weapon, the item would be 505.
Yeah.
And now it's kind of a weighted average between what your expertise is and what the item level is. So like, you know, a 590 item becomes like a 550 item if you have no training in the skill. So it's not as awful, but it's still not good. I don't know. Like they've made a bunch of tweaks, but the problem is like everything that they have done is universally better than what the state in which I left it. But once players get a bad taste in their mouth towards an MMO, the likelihood that any large number will ever go back to it is real small.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Unless there's like a FF14 moment where, you know, landslide of people from other games start playing and it like builds upon itself. And that's not going to happen to New World. Like I want it to do well. They've made some choices to throw out the original design and improve it, but I just don't think this one's salvageable. And like I'm having fun when I play, but also the problem with New World that it really has right now, like in spite of all those positive changes, it still has a fairly awful community because the only people that stuck around are the hardcore PvPers.
Ugh.
So,
yeah,
feels bad.
Yeah, and at this point, like I'm just not really willing to put up with that kind of community anymore. Like, I've got 2 MMOs that I'm, you know, varying levels of active of depending on, you know, the month.
Right.
That both have perfectly good communities. It's Guild Wars and Final Fantasy. Like the communities of both of those are real great. So I know it can happen.
I mean, I think that they would have to basically introduce a PvE only server, and I don't think they'll ever do that.
That, yeah, sounds highly unlikely.
I mean, because that's the problem is like all of their decisions drove away their PvE players. And while the end result now is a much more beneficial environment for PvE, I mean, you're not going to get them back. Like, had this existed at the time of launch, we may be talking a totally different story. But it's like you shot your shot and it's over, and nobody's going to give you a fresh chance at this point.
Trust is hard won and easily lost.
Yep.
It also felt a little bit like every single patch that the initial part of the game was designed to make playing it harder.
Yep.
Yes.
So that it didn't help.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things. Like one of your like weird game design quirks is if you need to price something out in your game and you don't have like a perfect idea of what that price should be, price it way too high. You should look at it and say, "Yep, that's too high," because you're either right and you can bring it down, or you're either right about it being too high and can bring it down, or you're wrong and it's the right number.
Yeah,
well,
because if you start out too low, you can't increase it.
Right, and that's the problem. Is like there was absolutely some oh shit moments happening when they realized, oh, players can just craft 30 million of the level 1 item and like burn through to the max level.
Yeah, that was bad.
Oh, so they're basically just dodging our entire crafting system. Sweet, we have to fix this.
Something iron daggers.
Yeah, like
yep.
I think I said that at the time.
Like, I feel like any MMO designer should be fully aware going in the fact that players will optimize everything. So you need to pay a lot of attention to all that.
You need somebody adversarial.
Yeah.
Who will figure out who is like there to break it.
right.
Like you know how your system is supposed to work, and that's great. You need someone who is going to just bend it over their knee.
Look at this. It's an arch. Where does it go? In the square hole.
You need someone like Brian or myself.
Well, like
good QA departments have these people already.
Yes.
All it took was someone with Excel to figure out how to break their crafting system.
Yeah. Like and that's what was really disappointing is like that was not a new problem. Like that's not a problem that no other game has previously had. It was not a unpredictable problem. Like,
as I've been alluding to a lot, Skyrim had that problem at launch.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and the thing with Skyrim is
a single player game, but
yeah. Well, and
it's
also
an example of systems interacting in unintended ways.
Yeah, but it's also like, you talk to a Skyrim dev and you're like, hey, did you know that iron daggers are like a way to circumvent the crafting system? And they're like, yeah, and doesn't matter. Like,
it's like you're only affecting your own game when you do that. So
if
that's what you want to do, fine.
Yeah, it was like when New World dropped the hammer on the outdoor farming stuff. Was like, why would you ever break that? No. Is it what you intended players to do? Absolutely not.
Roll with it.
But yeah, roll with it. Like your players are organizing community around this and having fun.
Right, like it was a blast. Like I was so excited when I talked about playing it because like it reminded me of the way MMOs used to feel.
Mm-hmm.
And it just got broke wide open. And now the problem is they have forced folks into dungeons because they wanted dungeons being run, and the community has optimized around their outdoor content. I would imagine nobody's actually crafting keys anymore, which was part of the whole thing why you needed these open outdoor dungeons, was to get the bits to craft keys. But if you can spend 500 gold to get a key off a vendor, it is way easier to farm 500 gold worth of stuff. It's the Guild Wars 2 problem. Like, it is easier to farm the gold to buy the stuff off the market than to farm the stuff.
Yeah. And and depending on the game, sometimes that's like that means that there's solvable problems. It's like, oh hey, we don't consider, it's like that's not necessarily a problem, because if you're talking about players trading with each other, then your costs are all going to even out eventually.
Right.
Someone has to farm it after all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
someone's got to farm it.
Right. And the thing is you're basically creating, money fountains for the people who want to go farm it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's yeah, it's like, and in a well structured thing, then if somebody's like, man, I really wish I had more money, they could be like, oh, this is a thing I could do, and then sell these proceeds to make a ton of money because everybody wants these and nobody wants to farm them.
Yep.
Now it's a problem when if you have stuff where it's like, oh, hey, there's this barrier to entry to be able to farm this, but if you do, now you have a bajillion D currency.
Yeah. But if it's just like, I don't know, like using Guild Wars 2 as an example, people need linseed oil for stuff. Linseed oil uses flaxseed. Well, somebody can go farm that flaxseed. They can make a decent amount of money doing it. And the
But
people who
it-
need the linseed oil, they can just buy it if they don't want to, go to the trouble of farming it up themselves.
Well, and that's a prime example because it also allows the player who is just casually gathering stuff to occasionally get a gold or two here or there, liquidating whatever they just happen to gather in a zone.
Yeah, or if you're gathering all the jungle plants and mussels that you run across as you're going through Heart of Thorns, hey, maybe you'll get a Maguma lily or a pearl, and then you've made some cash.
Yeah.
Not as much
Possibly
cash
quite
as
a
it used
lot
to
of
be,
cash.
but still a decent bit. Yeah.
I think lilies are still worth a crazy amount. Pearls, not so much.
But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, I kind of wish the game that exists right now had been there at launch because maybe things would be different. But I don't think any amount of changes right now, even though, like I said, all of these changes are kind of universally positive, I don't think it's going to turn the ship around.
I would be surprised. I mean, I guess anything's possible.
Yeah, I mean, like right now they're working on PvP rewards track and arenas, which is catering towards the people that are actually playing, but it is not going to do anything to bring back PvE players.
No.
And I will say, like, I have tried most of the things I could do, and Outpost Rush is still screwed. That if you are a tank and your team loses, you are not going to have accrued enough damage to really get you loser rewards. So you will have spent 30 minutes and walked away with nothing.
Yuck.
And like that's part of why I'm enjoying World versus World and PvP in Guild Wars 2 so much is like I mean I just got rolled like before the show. I did a round of PvP. We won, but I personally got rolled, so I didn't get a reward at the end. So that means I lost out on one of the dailies. But it was fine because all of the total rewards still felt like positive progress. Like I'm going to get Mystic Clovers from the PvP rewards tracks, which is really what I need more than anything. So like my time spent in there still felt valuable, even if I didn't complete all my dailies in one shot.
Yeah, win or lose, you're advancing that reward track.
Yeah, like I got something for my time, and tomorrow I'll probably pop back in and see if I can get a personal reward or personal award so I can get that daily done. Because it was fun enough for me to do it. Like I've stuck around long enough that now I'm starting to understand the swing of PvP, and I didn't feel like I just got steamrolled out of playing it. And that's kind of the problem that usually happens with PvP modes in games, is they're very much a game for people already in the know. Whereas, like Guild Wars 2 gives you enough wiggle room to learn, but also makes it still feel rewarding at the same time. So like, I think that's what's going to have to happen to Outpost Rush to actually get people to reliably queue for it. There's a lot of lessons that people could take away from Guild Wars 2 in the way that its PvP interaction works versus other games.
Yeah, because first you got to convince people to try it out to begin with, which can be a bit of a barrier, and then you got to get them to keep coming back. And if their initial experience is garbage, they're not gonna. So,
Yeah.
And I really think like a 30-minute match is too long.
Ugh, yeah,
Like that's a
that
long
is.
commitment when to me, like,
Isn't
at
that like
least,
twice as long as the max length match in FF14? Most of the
oh
modes.
yeah, absolutely. I think the longest one that I've ever played in 14 is 15 minutes.
I was going to say 10 to 15 minutes sounds like a reasonable length.
Yeah. I mean, and doing it that way, like it feels fine. Like you're in and out, and you're in just long enough to kind of get a feel for the game and get a hang for it, and then you're on to the next one. But I mean, like I said, I crafted a set of void bin armor that was kind of a thing I wish I had done before I quit. I'm happy. I mean, like it was fake money in a fake game, so it's not like me spending all of it on a set of armor is a bad thing. It's, you know, if it goes away and I stop playing it, I'm not really out anything.
Yep.
So I hear a game of Necromunda was played.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I've commented that I've been playing 40K. I had this, I really like crazy conversion projects. And having come off of Cyberpunk, I was like, okay, I could make a Cyberpunk AdMech army. This is going to be great. And I picked up, and so to pull this off, I picked up some Necromunda minis to kind of test it out. Figured I'd use those parts to kind of blend with AdMech pieces and had this whole grand design. And then I opened the sprues and stared at them and realized that they are horrifically incompatible with the minis I was going to convert. And then the 40K meta became a complete disaster, and I stopped being interested in putting together the army that was currently dunking on everyone.
What, you don't want to play Harlequins?
I haven't ever since they've been just oppressive. I've been like, no, I can't with that.
Isn't that the army you picked up when you started to get into 8th edition?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it happens.
It happens sometimes.
I mean, we had this in our local meta with Iron Hands last edition.
Yeah.
Although hasn't the meta moved on to Tyranids being awful now?
Yeah, right now what it
Yes,
is
it has.
Tyranids are just unbelievably oppressive.
I mean, it feels like it's kind of back to all the stories I used to hear where the newest codex is broken overpowered.
Yeah. That's the way of Warhammer.
Yeah, that classically, yeah.
And the worst,
They've avoided this in fantasy mostly.
Yeah, they mostly avoided this in fantasy. But anyway, long story short, I had all of these sprues of Necromunda minis. I picked up the rule book and kind of vaguely skimmed it, but wasn't. It has the problem of you really need to have several different books to make sense of everything. And at the time, they were still in the middle of releasing stuff, and it was kind of whatever. They just released their new Ash Wastes starter set, which has a bunch of incredibly Star Wars looking buildings, which I'm completely here for.
And an army that also looks like it walked straight off of Tatooine.
It's true. But I basically wanted the terrain pieces and was like, you know what? Maybe I'll give this a go. Maybe I'll give this like an actual go, because buying the starter box for just the terrain is less expensive than buying just the terrain. Say what you like about Games Workshop and their pricing. They know how to price their starter boxes so that they are a good deal.
I think they've always been that way. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always been just like an unbelievable, their starter boxes are at the point where if you're buying them for just the minis half the time, if you're buying them for just the minis inside, for one faction of the minis inside, you're getting a good deal.
Well, okay, so let me clarify. There was a time, namely 2nd edition Warhammer 40K, where the starter boxes had such generically horrific sculpts in them that no one wanted to use them.
Yeah, I do remember those.
The state of starter boxes, as long as I've encountered them, which is not that long, Age of Sigmar 2nd edition, is the starter boxes are crazy good value. And the start collecting boxes, which are sort of the army starters, some of them are so good that you do all of your collecting with those boxes.
Yes, start or continue collecting. But yeah, I wound up with this, like, I don't know, random whim to try out Necromunda, possibly because I miss Infinity a little bit, but also Infinity is just it's a really heavy game, and I'm just not feeling heavy games at the moment. So I, picked up some Necromunda and was looking at like, hey, if I actually wanted to play this, what does this look like? There's a site that does Goonhammer that does it's where I read my like 40k and Age of Sigmar like commentary, but they also did Necromunda stuff. And one of the things they did was this new Necromunda, like a series on the new Necromunda, including a quick start guide where they're just like, hey, we put together some gangers for you. You can go like 3 or 4 models aside and just get a sense of the game. And I've tried a couple of those, and I think that I expected the redo of Necromunda, because it's got so much of that like old 80s, Warhammer Quest.
Well, it's got. I mean, it's a very much 2000 AD comics like put into miniature form.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I remembered seeing some of those. Like I played Warhammer. I played the original, like, what is it, mid 80s Warhammer Quest.
Mm-hmm.
It can be fun, but it's not a great game, not by modern standards. And I, for whatever reason, kind of expected that the new Necromunda was going to be like that. It's actually really fun. It just Games Workshop really loves its kind of wacky rules sometimes, and they're all here. You've got the scatter dice, you've got your guns jamming, you've got plasma weapons blowing up, you've got people falling off of stuff, you've got people falling off of stuff onto other people while on fire. Like,
Ooh, you get to use the things falling on other things rules.
yeah,
It's always good.
there's just a bunch of little things that happen to be interesting. And so like I rolled up, I played a couple of games now, one with Ash earlier this afternoon, and it's fun, and it's leaning really heavily into its RPG mechanics, which just no other minis game is doing, really. Not to the same level.
Like Age of Sigmar is Path to Glory and 40k is Crusade, but this is just all about the RPG mechanics, not just some of them built to support the game that already existed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like-
because doesn't Necromunda have like a whole campaign mode where you can actually like
It has
gain
several.
experience for your models and like
Yeah.
improve them over the course of the campaign? Yeah.
It has at least
The
5.
primary mechanics do expect you to be, like gaining experience, doing after combat stuff. That's just sort of built into everything.
Yeah, it's the difference between StarCraft and Final Fantasy Tactics. Because like, and
Yeah.
what I think is really interesting is that like I would never play like a pickup game of StarCraft that was hideously unbalanced, but I do that in, like, that's half the missions in FF Tactics.
Mm-hmm.
And you get that same sort of feel where it's like this individual battle is not the be all end all. We did roll our after battle rolls did end up having one of Ash and my characters just actually die, which is doesn't happen much.
Because they ask you to roll like the D66 for this. Those outcomes are 61 through 66. And we got 64 and 66.
Well,
So like, whoops, it's just your people die. But for a minis game campaign, you really don't want your people to die all the time. Like,
yeah.
But like mostly they're just not gonna, because those are not the common outcomes.
yeah, you buy more, you like hire more gangers, you upgrade equipment and stats, and your like regular terrible person becomes just a shocking badass.
Yeah, I always got the impression
Eventually.
that Necromunda was kind of over in the same general area as Blood Bowl, but less silly.
Probably. I haven't played Blood Bowl. I was
'Cause
like, I don't know about less silly, and then I thought about Blood Bowl for 2 seconds.
Blood Bowl's real silly. But because Blood Bowl's basically doing the same sort of thing where you've got your Blood Bowl team that you're managing, and your players can get injured or killed in the games, and you can recruit new players, and they improve over time as they play more. So
And your cheerleaders matter.
yes, but also it's orcs and Skaven playing like a British take on American football. So, it's incredibly silly. Whereas
I have
Necromunda
some
is
Blood
like,
Bowl models because they actually go pretty well with the Skaven aesthetic as is.
yeah, I mean, the orcs do too. Yeah. Whereas Necromunda, I've gathered, is more just, it's more like classic rogue trader level
Yeah.
of goofiness.
Yeah. It wants you to try nonsense things.
I mean, it feels
Because-
a bit like the 40K aesthetic just distilled. Like, this is a very serious game of serious gang warfare, and nothing about it is actually what's serious.
Yeah. It is definitely more obviously tongue in cheek than 40K has managed to be. But also like and it's got you get a little bit more of it's a little bit more blatant about that because it's like one of your cards that you can play on an opponent is the click card, which is you're out of ammo. Your gun goes click. They do have a lot of new vehicle rules, and I feel like they don't yet have the vehicle models out to justify these rules.
I mean, it's only very recently they acknowledged you might be outside.
Yes. But like I was flipping through the various cards that you can play, and one of the cards you could play is you don't have to roll when you're jumping from one moving vehicle to another. Sorry, what? What's happening here? Jumping from a moving vehicle to another.
Look, I have to get to you with my shock whip somehow.
Oh yeah, there's just a ton of fun little interactions. The like Ash's leader Indiana Jones me with a whip and knocked my leader down from range.
Very nice.
In a game I was playing in the other game that I played with a friend of mine, I had this like sniper with a plasma gun up on a tower, and it got hit with a knockback weapon and knocked off the tower.
Oops.
I'm just like, I didn't expect we were going to get here, but here we are.
Let's dig into this pile of rules that we almost never use.
Yeah.
I do feel like this game is just going to do that more often.
Yeah.
Oh, there's this rule about standing on a high thing, and what happens if you are only kind of standing on the high thing. I guess we got some of those at Warcry as well, now that I think about it.
Yeah. I really enjoy this sort of skirmish games where your models are actually like characters. And I love the RPG mechanics where it's like, hey, this, it's been this, it's the tradition with minis games where it's like, oh, that unit completely wrecked shop this game. Time to give them a nice paint job, or like maybe make a little like a little tally mark on the hull of the tank or whatever. And I like having the personal touch with a bunch of these, especially because they really love giving you way more bits than you need. I was looking at like, what do you actually need to start this game? And you don't need a lot. Turns out one gang box is pushing it. It's like overkill. It's more models than you probably need. I guess you'd probably get more over the course of a campaign. So I don't know what that looks like, but
So I'm gonna kind of shoehorn a topic in real quick, because there's a topic coming up, and it is the prime example of this. But I do not know what prompted me to do this, but somehow I saw something about Ashes of Creation, and I went out to Kickstarter to look up what phase of testing I would get in with the backing that I gave it. And it led me down a whole rabbit hole of, I noticed every single game on Kickstarter has an estimated delivery date on it. And these are all horrifically wrong.
Yes, they pull them out of a hat.
So over the course of the existence of Kickstarter, I have backed 25 video games.
The games that did not do this.
Right. Like I have backed 25 games, and on average, out of that list, games were at least 20 months late on average based on that estimate. And I just to keep it simple, I did it on a month-to-month basis, not specific days. Tug, the Untitled game, which wrote in on the pretty Minecraft MMO kind of thing, it's never released. It's dead in the water. Last update was 2017. So it's going on like 96 months that it's...
I was going to say, it feels like it's been a long time since I heard anything about that.
Yeah,
now I know why.
It's pretty much dead in the water, but nobody's willing to admit it because legal reasons.
Yeah.
I feel like I have a few games blowing out this average.
Yeah, like I had a
If I were to look at
handful.
my back projects.
I had a handful, like Mages of Mistralia.
That's
They,
one.
they delivered a month early from their estimate.
I was actually going to say, I didn't actually kickstart that. I just bought it when it came out.
Yeah. Yeah. And Amplitude was a month late, which
Yeah.
is reasonable.
Yeah, that's fine.
And there was another one that was within a month.
I
and
mentioned Chicory a lot because it beat its estimate.
Yeah. But like the vast majority, yeah, no, their number that they put on the paper was not realistic at all.
Like regularly, they are years late.
And like my theory as to why this is oftentimes these games have a person that worked in video games or a handful of people that worked in video games, but not in the project management side of video games.
Yeah.
They were a developer or a musician or an artist and probably never had to deal with actual like deliverable deadlines.
So I find if I look at board games, these estimates are a lot closer.
Right.
With the exception of anything with an estimate that comes in around February or March, which will be 6 or more months late.
Yeah, like I was only looking at video games because physical products that I've backed, for the most part, arrive plus or minus a few months.
I want to say Monster Sanctuary also beat or made its estimate because its estimate was October 2020. And it came out I know it came out before the end of 2020, but very close to. Came out in December. So 2 months late, which is completely reasonable considering it's 2020.
But I have noticed, like looking back through my data, I haven't backed many Kickstarter games in a while because I know there's a really long lead time and I might as well just wait till it actually exists.
Yeah, the last video game I backed on Kickstarter was BattleTech. So yeah, that's been a while.
Was that after R-Type 2?
Or maybe Bloodstained. I didn't actually back R-Type 2.
Oh, okay.
I didn't either. I backed BattleTech, but I didn't back R-Type 2.
I think because by that point I had like become somewhat soured on backing.
The last one.
So I was like, I'll just buy it when it comes out.
The last one that I backed, I think, was in 2021, but it was the Sunless Skies romance game. And the only reason why I backed it is because I want to support more nonsense in the Sunless Sky or the Sunless Sea setting.
Yeah.
I did back a few video games last year and one this year, but that one is Mina the Hollower from Yacht Club. So their estimate is December 2023. Who knows if they'll make it? They probably will. But like, I don't care. The Shovel Knight was amazing. I'm perfectly happy to throw money at this company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, like, since BattleTech and Bloodstained, I've backed Mystery Science Theater and a webcomic.
There are a lot of physical games on my list and an awful lot of RPGs in my list.
Well, and now Die, but they haven't actually taken the money yet. I did upgrade my die pledge to the highest one, so now I'm going to get the pretty holographic dice.
Woohoo!
And a 6-sider out of a Monopoly set.
Backed Caillou and Crow. I, for some reason, backed Anime 5e, which I'm not actually remembering why I did this, but I did. They just got the book out. The book was done around their estimate, which was September last year. They just shipped it out recently, which, again, the state of the world makes that one kind of understandable. The development was done. But yeah, Kickstarters are developing a game takes a long time.
It does.
Yeah, basically everything's going to take twice as long as you think.
At least.
True facts.
Which brings us to
perpetually developed games. And Star Citizen.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not going to go down my rabbit hole on like
this is a game and you can play it and it's more complete than some games that are released. But yes, it also has some problems.
Yeah, I mean, and the problems lie with an absolutely unbelievably absurd level of ambition. It to some frankly silly degrees, like why would anyone do this? And the answer is it's Star Citizen. They're doing things that nobody would even consider doing because they're the only ones who can, really. But their big push this year is, from what I can tell, is major gameplay improvements, like core gameplay improvements, which is good. Getting more gameplay into the game is good. But the thing that they released recently was loot. And the game already kind of had loot. Like, you could, if you got into a gunfight with somebody and shot them, you could take their whatever they were carrying. Most NPCs have some armor and like maybe a ammo for their gun or whatever. And now there's like chests and boxes in missions. NPCs can occasionally carry weird rare items. Like sometimes they'll have a fancy gun with fancy modifications on it. And it seems like such a little thing, but it really it changes the tenor of how I play the game. It's not like, oh, I go in here, I shoot a bunch of people and I leave. It's like, no, I'm gonna see if there's anything worth grabbing in here. Maybe I get something cool. Maybe I'll get a rare armor helmet. And that's kind of fun. And because the loot is all super temporary and whatever, it's like, oh, if I lose it later, it's no big deal. But it's kind of neat to run around with this cool helmet on while I got it, or like this cool set of armor, or like a gun with a rare skin. And they've really been pushing their the other thing that they've done recently are derelicts. So you can go find a ruin of a crashed ship, and frequently there's something cool on it. They have much higher instances of rare loot. So it's neat seeing it all come together, or seeing more things start to come together. I think the big thing that they're pushing for now is being able to support more than one star system. Because currently their star system, the entire game runs on a server, and so they're hitting some upper limits on what they can actually, how many people can they have on the server, and how much can they simulate on one server, and how many game features can they add, because the server just tips over and catches fire.
I am very interested in this game at some point. Like it's not there yet because first of all, the lack of persistence right now to where everything is very much in test mode and will get blown away is not appealing, but it needs to get to the point to where, Tam, you can be our ship captain and you're going to take us to derelicts and I'm going to fight stuff on the derelicts and then we're going to fly back to port and make money off of the stuff we found.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and there's definitely the like start of bones of that.
Yeah, I have no doubt that this is going to be the game that delivers that at some point, to where like you don't have to pilot ships, because I don't want to pilot a ship ever. I don't like flying ships.
But you'll drive the tank. But you'll drive the tank around.
I'll drive the tank around, or like I'll shoot bad guys, and I'll storm pirate asteroid bases.
Yeah, a ship that I have been waiting for quite some time did release this week, and I'm very excited about it. It is the Scorpius, which is it's like the unholy child of a Star Fury, and X-Wing, and a Y-Wing. Like, what if you had a slightly bulkier X-Wing, bulkier and more heavily armored X-Wing that had a turret gunner seat in it? And that ship is fun. It's fun to fly. It's fun to be the gunner in. And it's like, I want more of that one. But they have a tendency to like advertise concept ships that I like the dream that they're selling, but the gameplay really just isn't there. The one they're selling right now, the one that they're like showcasing right now, is this. It's a boarding vessel. It's got a hacking. I guess it's supposed to have a hacking suite on it and a boarding like probe, so you can board other ships with it, which is cool in concept, but it's definitely none of that here yet. The other thing they have, this is their free fly week. So it's like, hey, if you feel like playing the game for free and checking it out, you can play for free. And they pair that with the Invictus launch week, which is basically like the military is showing off its service vehicles. Like it's I don't know if anybody else has ever been in a place that has like a military air show or like a military dock base somewhere where they have the like public come in and look at the inside of a battleship or a submarine or like an aircraft carrier or whatever. But they've replicated that. You can take a tour of the one of the biggest ships in the game, and it's somebody went on a whole bunch of tours. There's you've got these various NPCs that are telling you about their particular parts of the ship, and it's a little on the nose. You've got the uptight officer who is like talks like they're giving orders, but is talking to a bunch of civilians and has to keep trying to rein it in. There's the like volunteer service person who's talking about like the mess hall or whatever, and is clearly regrets having volunteered for this. It is just like projecting that energy in all of the dialogue, but is like making awkward jokes. It's a weirdly accurate thing where it's like, yep, you're a tourist on a in service military ship. And like that's already a little weird. And so they're just leaning into it. But it's also neat to see the sense of scale. They have another even bigger ship that flies by. And there's a video that's been going around Reddit that's like players foolishly engaging this thing and fighting it like a Star Destroyer and getting just wrecked. But it looks really cool. But there's definitely something about the flying, seeing your fighter, being able to walk around your like personal fighter and seeing that like, oh, that's actually pretty big. Like I'm just a person standing next to this thing that's pretty big, and then you fly up on a ship that's just like a kilometer long. It gives you another crazy sense of scale. But every time they add, I continue to be impressed. Like every big patch they add stuff, it's pretty significant. The other thing that this patch dropped is some very noticeable performance improvements, kind of as a precursor to some changes to their renderer that they're working on. And there's still bugs. It's still awkward. Like the game is still very much in alpha. I'm not gonna like, oh, it's magically amazing now. Like even right now, people are like, there are too many people trying to play this game right now. Things are tipping over and catching fire. They launched the Invictus launch week thing. The ships all go over to like particular stations and hang out there. And through some error, a different event with pirates that take over a station got triggered.
Oh no.
And so the pirates taking over a station got triggered around the station that all of the event ships were at. And evidently that went sideways real fast. You've got the scripting and you've got the super carrier crashing into one another. And evidently it was very cool to watch until the server crashed. The big thing that I am watching for is the big thing that I'm watching for is what happens when they figure out servers and getting more people on a server and so forth. Like, is this game going to become a nightmare PvP hellscape, or are they going to put other stuff in the game to contain that? Or is it
that will be a factor as to whether or not I actually care.
I mean, it's going to be a big factor as to, you know, whether or not I actually recommend this to people when it gets into a better state. Because right now, like,
hello, I am the griefer magnet. I am part of the problem.
Right, like, I mean, I can count the number of times that I have had a hostile in a few hundred hours of play. I've probably run into another player acting in a hostile manner like twice. And one of those times, it was somebody who was explicitly like picking fights with people and then paying them like, hey, that was a great fight. Here's, 250,000 credits. Appreciate you taking the time. I know that it wasn't what you were planning. And like Okay, fine, whatever. Somebody getting their jollies off and then being like, yeah, I'm a good sport about it though. Here's something for your trouble is not the kind of community that that's not how the community continues to exist after alpha.
Yeah, that only exists because money is monopoly money right now.
Yeah, exactly. And it'll be interesting to see where do things go? Like where do they go with this? Because even EVE Online's, high security space hasn't really solved this problem.
Nope.
But on the other hand, getting into a ship with like 2 or 3 other friends all on different stations and working together on something feels so cool. Like even something that sounds really banal, like going out and mining, is pretty fun with a small group of people. I dearly hope it gets there. Like gets the place where it's fun to play for a bunch of people and supports a bunch of different play styles and isn't just a PvP hellscape.
Yeah, because nothing's going to feel worse than we all get together, we fly up to a hulk, we clear it out, we're taking out the treasure, and someone has been waiting in the wings watching for us to leave and takes it all from us.
Yeah.
That was a good description of my Sea of Thieves experience.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of people Sea of Thieves experience. It's like, it was fun up until the point in which it wasn't.
Mm-hmm. It's a super hard problem to solve. Minus the 100% effective solution. But like I happen to think that the Division had a very good answer to this. Like there's the PvE zones and there's the very rewarding but also open PvP zone. And if you go into that place, you know what you're getting into, and maybe the rewards are worth it for you, but you don't have to. And it hurts nobody that you don't.
And the thing with that too is like it was real merciless because like the second that you tried to get loot out, it notified everybody in the zone that you were leaving with loot. It's like there was no mistaking that for what it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you know what is what you're getting into, and like you could perfectly reasonably play the game without ever doing that, but maybe you want the shinies. And I'm totally okay. I'm totally fine with that. I don't think that I think that it's perfectly reasonable to be like, yeah, you're gonna put great loot there. You're opting into this risk.
Yeah, I mean, my problem with that mechanic though is when they start putting things there that you can't get anywhere else.
Yeah.
Like it should be quantity and frequency of rewards cranked up, not uniqueness cranked up. Like,
yeah.
I mean, Guild Wars has stuff you can only get in World v World.
Yeah, but there's a path to similar items.
Sort of. Sometimes. But also, like, you don't have to be good to get any of those things.
Right. Yeah, like the reward tracks don't. Yeah, they don't. They reward time in zone more than they reward success.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the other thing is being rewarded regardless of your level of success is a good way to make people okay with the ideal PvP level of success, which is about 50%.
I mean, you have to pay your fodder. That's really it. Like the key problem that I've always run into with games that are heavily PvP focused is hardcore PvPers don't want even matches. They don't. Like they're fine with them from time to time, but once you ratchet it down and put a skill-based matchmaking bracket, it slows down their matchmaking and it makes it so that every game is sweaty, and they don't want that.
Right.
They want some moments to be sweaty. So like if in order to get that, you have to be willing to reward your cannon fodder for signing up and playing too.
If you want me to be a sheep, you need to pay me to be a sheep.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not just going to go do it.
Final Fantasy XIV has done a pretty good job of paying me to be a sheep sometimes.
Yeah, and if you spend enough time being paid to be a sheep, eventually you start to pick things up and you're a bit less of a sheep and more of a participant.
I guess that's also fair. Like, I'm not actually terrible at Final Fantasy XIV PvP.
I'm not terrible at World versus World or PvP in Guild Wars 2.
Yeah.
But I absolutely was on day one. But the rewards kept me going to keep throwing myself at it. Like, and I've gotten better.
Yeah, you just need to get, and like it's like anything. You practice enough, you practice a thing enough, and you get better at it. I remember looking at a player survey from a few years ago that was like, if you have a player playing in PvE, how often do they expect to win? And it's like 95% of the time.
Yup.
Which is perfectly reasonable for PvE.
Mm-hmm.
If you're playing in a PvE game, it is 100% okay for you to win 19 times out of 20. That's fine. NPCs are never going to be sad, and you should. Like, you can crank that up, but even in something like Elden Ring, if you take an aggregate of all of the encounters I have in that game, it's still like in the 80s. Most of my fights I won. It's just I remember the ones that I didn't because they were often brutal, and I worked real hard to actually eventually beat them. But in the meantime, I carved through all kinds of regular enemies. There were even some bosses that I one-shot that I was like, oh, was that even a boss? Huh. But like most of the time I won. In PvP, a perfect match is a coin flip. That means you've got even skilled people.
If it's two sides.
Yeah, if it's two sides.
A lot of games don't even have that. They have three potential.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
entries.
as soon as there's more than two sides, you should expect to lose more often than you win.
Yeah. Well, and that was the interesting thing. The percentage that PvP players thought that they should win, 60 to 65%. And like that sure isn't 95%, but that means that they're winning more than they lose, which means that naturally they're going to try to seek out fights they can win.
Mm-hmm.
Of course you end up with griefers. Of course you end up with people setting up uneven matches and preying on newbies, because that's how you get to the win rate that feels right to you.
Right. Like, I mean, it's true in World versus World. Like, you're trucking along on your, mount, and you're in a pack of 3 people, and you see a straggler. That straggler is never going to engage that pack of 3 people. Never. Yeah. They're going to try and avoid the pack of 3 people. The pack of 3 people is going to swoop down on the single. Like, that's just what happens.
And it's why you end up with so many games where, I mean, it's the structured versus unstructured PvP thing. If you're like one person running around flagged in Terran Mill, and suddenly you get jumped by 30 people, like that's unstructured PvP, and nobody liked it. South Shore versus Terran Mill was only fun when there were a bajillion people on either side, and even that was kind of pushing it.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't that fun. It was just something you could do.
It was what we had.
Yeah.
But I think what made that somewhat enjoyable, because I spent time out there doing it, is if you have an army of 60 players bashing up against an army of 60 players, every time the two sides clash, there's going to be losers of that battle.
Mm-hmm.
However, statistically, you are not going to lose as often if you're in a pack. Like, you're not always going to be the one that gets singled out. So it feels better if you're winning some of those fights in a big pack. Like, and sure, you'll have to peel off and run back from time to time because you're the one who died, but you spend more time in the little pack running around. Yeah, anyway. I think the games that are more enjoyable for PvP are the ones that reward PvP, win or lose.
Yeah.
I mean, and there can be some disparity there between how much you're rewarded based on your success, but it shouldn't be enough that it feels bad.
I'm actually thinking about this regarding like board games now, because like I own a lot of board games that are kind of aggro. One of the major ones, Argent, which is a worker placement game where you're in a magic school. It's actually very cool. However, that game is crazy aggro, and you can injure other players' workers. And if you do, they get sent to the infirmary, and they get to take a reward immediately. one of these rewards is IP, one of the most important things in the entire game. So that's sort of a consolation prize, but it's a great consolation prize.
Yeah. Well, and I posit that with the right incentives, you could get people to enjoy unstructured open world PvP. But boy, that would have to be tuned so high. They're like, oh, you got ganked? Here's a treasure chest.
Yep.
But that number exists somewhere.
You
It's just
spent
that nobody-
15 minutes doing this. I'm going to reward you based on your time spent, not based on win or lose.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, you gotta pay the sheep, and it has there's a nice arc to it if you do it that way, because if you're paying out the sheep, commensurate with how much they're getting wrecked, as they get better, they'll get wrecked less, but they'll get the normal rewards more.
Right. But it creates this culture where like you're constantly putting an influx of new players because the barrier of entry is so low.
Yeah. I still
Like-
remember Daok, Dark Age of Camelot, if your side was winning, you got that huge buff, and you're like, oh, where's that buff coming from? And people would be like, oh yeah, because the PvPers went and did a bunch of work for everybody. And people would be like, oh, I've been benefiting from this buff without even doing anything. Maybe I'll go and try it out. And there were always like PvP groups that were like, look, we just need bodies. Follow this person.
Yep.
All you need to do is you need to follow this person and maybe throw some fireballs around or whatever. But really, we just want a jillion people so that the like 12 of us who know what we're doing can survive long enough.
Do you know what tanks did in Dark Age of Camelot? They carried siege equipment. Like that's what we did because we had the endurance to carry siege equipment. So like my job was to run up on the battlefield and deploy a siege weapon, and then my job was over. But that job was critical.
If you died after that, you still had won. You did the thing, and it wasn't a complicated thing.
No, it was just like run up to this gate, drop a battering ram.
I mean, I still remember running around the first time I went in as a friar, and somebody was like,
oh,
they were like,
oh, that's unfair.
Well, I was like, I don't know what to do. And they're like, oh, you're a friar. Do you have a robe on you? And I was like, yeah, but I don't even know if I did, but they were like, put this robe on, go stand with, see all these like priests and stuff, go stand with them, cast some spells, heal them or cast buffs or whatever. Just look busy. At some point, somebody with knives is going to come at your group and you beat the shit out of them. And I'm like, okay, I could try to do that. And some nightshade rolled up, tried to stab me, and I beat the fuck out of them because I was a warrior with a big stick and they were a glorified pickpocket.
Yeah, I mean, and I played a lurking nightshade for a while. They're not real sturdy.
No, I was shocked at how fast this person died. I was just like, I killed a player having never done that in Daok before. And the like 7 healers that were around me were like, oh my God, I'm so glad you're here. They probably could have killed all of us. Those things are super scary to us, and you just rolled them. And I just hung out with priests. I made friends with a bunch of healers. I had no idea what I was doing. I just did what the person said. Same happens in Guild Wars too. I don't know what I'm doing. I just follow.
I follow the commander. Yeah, like I follow the commander and I harass people with rain of arrows. That's the secret to my world versus world success.
Yeah, I put a feedback bubble up on large groups of people and chuckle.
Like I'm trying to lay down fields of rain of arrows to kind of shape people to go into a kill funnel for the rest of the group.
That Mesmer bubble is every bit as good now as it was when the game launched.
Firebrand is a similar bubble, and it's kind of funny. Feedback, however, doesn't that also debuff people inside the thing?
Feedback is just the bubble of projectile reflect.
But I thought it did something else to people that happened to be standing inside of it.
Oh, I have no idea. It might.
I guess that's way less important, but still.
Way less important. Watch people just keel over inside it.
But like, I loved taking keeps and that sort of stuff in Dark Age Camelot.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I like World versus World so much. It's a
super-
very
it's
similar
super
feel.
fun. It's super fun to roll around with the group, and unlike a raid, I don't have to be good.
No, I just have to be able to target things and, kind of follow the group and not fall behind. And
Yeah. I don't have to be good. I just have to be there.
yeah, because there is a certain thing that there's a certain pressure that comes in just having numbers. And, and a lot of times when you've got a group of 40 plus people, just the fact that you've got that many people is going to peel off folks and get them to go in different directions and not engage with the pack.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and the other thing is, if I have a bad time, I can leave and do something else while still playing the same game.
But the funny thing though is when I decide, I think I'm done for a while, I end up going to a town and hang out a few more minutes later because I want to make sure I get my next prize chest.
Well, yes. You leave right after a tick.
Exactly. Once you get your tick, then you can exit.
Oh, fascinating. I do the opposite. I leave right before a tick.
Why would you do that?
Because it saves where you are.
Okay.
Or not my tick. I guess maybe it's not the tick. I tend to stop right before the next bar fills, whichever bar it is.
Oh, you're thinking like levels. I'm talking about every 5 minutes you're given a reward.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Yeah, I wait for that thing to tick down and I get my reward and then I walk away.
Yeah, that's fair. I also have the tendency I have a tendency to log out. If I'm going to take a break for an evening, I'll log out with 300 XP to level or whatever tiny number is left.
Yeah, I do that too because I don't know if tomorrow's dailies are going to be ranks and you have to get 2 ranks in the same day, which is a not insignificant amount of World versus World to get 2 full ranks.
Because that requires actually succeeding in some things.
If that's the case, I really hope we've got the center keep in Eternal Battleground and I can just defend. Because I will get way more experience defending than taking objectives.
You still miss castle.
Yep.
Yeah, because if we own the castle, the other teams, there's almost always going to be members of the other teams trying to attack it.
And as a ranger, like a longbow ranger, I was really designed to defend. But this is the prime example of really well-designed PvP. There's lots of different roles you can fill in World versus World. You can engage with it in your own fashion. And no matter what you're doing, you're being rewarded for it. I think I was ranked 2 when I came back to the game recently, and now I'm ranked 41. And it's just me playing a little bit every day.
I definitely have not ranked up in PvP.
I don't know what I'm at in actual PvP. 15, 16, something like that. I'm not very high. I'm still a deer. I was a rabbit.
I was going to say, I'm a rabbit. I will probably always be a rabbit.
Same.
You get cute finishers for your rank. It does make me want to try and grind out the Mad King finisher come Halloween, the permanent one.
I have a bunch of temporary ones.
I was gonna say, don't you get enough temporary ones to last you a very, very long time?
I have a bunch of them.
Yeah, I've got about 250 each of the Mad King, and the Scarecrow.
That's the holiday event I'm really looking forward to. I liked the Mad King's stuff. I think the title of the show may be Reward Your Sheep. Anyway, I don't know if we have enough time to dive into another topic.
Probably not.
Well, I guess that's it. Any final thoughts?
If all of the things that I've said about Star Citizen haven't turned you off by now, Invictus launch week is this week. You can play for free. It's a neat experience. Install it on an SSD.
Yeah. And as fast of an SSD as you can possibly get.
I mean, speed of the SSD. Once you're in an SSD, it's not.
Also,
that
it really
much of a
wants
deal.
more than 16 gigs of RAM.
It is pretty RAM hungry.
Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed the show, and we will see you again next week. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
See you.